Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 163 of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. So you clicked it. You want to know how to never get injured again. I want to know this too. I kind of let you guys in on a secret that I struggle getting injured sometimes. And these tips are just things that really have helped me, just more concepts that have really helped me know when I do get injured, why I am getting injured, and also just how to prevent it, how to do better for the next one. And these are lessons that I've been learning over and over again for 15 years. So just keep in mind that I'm doing my best with it, and I'm sure you are too when it comes to injury prevention. But yeah, hopefully these tips are helpful. Different note, Spotify wrap up. It's starting to kick off. It's time for people to start sharing their top 5 listened to songs, their most listened to song, and then most importantly, the top 5 podcasts that they listen to. If the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show is on the top 5 podcasts that you listen to and you screenshot that and share it on your story on Instagram, as long as you tag me, I have a free gift for you. I'll give you a spoiler. It's a free instructional. And so it's a really, really good free Christmas gift. The reason I'm giving it is the only way that I am in the top 5 podcasts that you listen to is if you are an I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show listener, or you just don't listen to many podcasts at all. If that's the case, you slip through the cracks. Good for you. But if not, it's just kind of my way of saying thank you for listening to the show. The show has increased. I got my own wrap up from Spotify as a content creator, and the listeners just on Spotify have more than doubled over the last year, and that's not including all of the other platforms that have grown even more. And so just super thankful for that. That's really cool that you guys choose to listen to me for an hour each week, and it really makes me feel special. If you guys want that free gift though, you have to tag me at the Josh McKinney on Instagram. You could also tag the show, I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. Either one of those would be fine. But I will then send you a coupon code for a free course on simplifyingjujitsu.com. And so yeah, I think that's everything. Oh, you know what? Something interesting. In the year's wrap up, I saw that it's been I have posted 3,000 minutes plus of content this year through the podcast. That's a lot of me talking. That's too much of me talking. But next year, I promise we will have even more content put out. So if you guys liked those 50 hours of podcasting, you'll like the next 50 hours, 100 hours, 1,000 hours that we put out. 1,000 hours probably too much, but a decent amount of hours we'll put out on the podcast this next year. Got a lot of exciting things coming. That's pretty much all I have for you guys today. Don't forget, give me that 5-star review. Don't forget, tag me on your Spotify wrapped up on your Instagram, and you can get a free gift. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this episode. Of course, we'll jump in with a lot of caution because we're not trying to get injured, but let's jump into 3 ways to never be injured again. Here are 3 ways to never get injured again. And now, before we get started, as I like to preface episodes with a disclaimer. Anytime I'm talking about something like 3 ways to never get injured again, I really do think that these are 3 ways to never, ever sustain an injury again. Now, the implementation of this is not easy though. It's the same as when I teach a concept in jiu-jitsu, and maybe I'm teaching the concept of defense and defending your armpit and your hip space, defending control that a person may have. And I go out to compete, and this is still the idea that is on my mind. But at some point in the fight, I lose an underhook, and that is the start of my demise in the match. That isn't the idea failing. Sometimes it is. Sometimes your idea wasn't what you hoped it to be. And the idea fails, and it's just because the idea, the concept, however you were planning on competing, the things you were planning on doing, you did not understand them deep enough. And so they didn't work. Now, other times, it is simply the implementation of the idea. Just because I lost that underhook and I got my guard passed, that does not mean that that underhook was more important than the idea. Actually, that underhook probably proves the idea even more, because until then, I was not in a bad spot. Once until I've lost the underhook, I was not losing, right? I just didn't implement the idea well enough. I didn't protect my underhooks well enough. Basically, what I'm saying is me losing in this hypothetical match that I have lost hundreds of times, me losing in this hypothetical space, that is not the idea being wrong. It is the implementation. So these things, these suggestions that I'm going to give you throughout this episode, yes, I try to follow these things. You should try to follow these things. But we're not going to be perfect on them. And there are still going to be reasons, there are going to be ways that we get injured. But I really think if you are cognizant of the three things that we are going to talk about, you will sustain less injury. And most importantly, just like when we have a good concept, it's something that we can fall back on. So when I do sustain an injury, and however significant that injury is, I can start to ask myself some questions about these three tips and say, hey, was I doing this? Oh, I wasn't. That doesn't make the idea wrong. It's just my implementation, right? So let's get into the three ways to never get injured again. The first way, the most important way, is to prioritize rest. That is, I ask so many different people this year. Like with the podcast is built around what I feel like talking about and what I feel like learning about. So even the episodes that I'm doing, even today's episode, this is something that is interesting to me now. This isn't me trying to talk down to somebody who is a lower belt level than me. This is me trying to actually understand how to not get injured. I've been dealing with injuries for a long time now. And I think that I have the reasons for the injuries pretty figured out. And the first reason is prioritizing rest. I went on this journey this year, pretty much all of 2022, trying to find the best routine that I could when it comes to getting better at jiu-jitsu, when it comes to staying healthy, when it comes to being able to perform at a really high level for competition. And I have done a lot of trial and error with this routine, with these ideas. But the biggest thing, the number one thing out of all of the coaches that I ask on the podcast or all the coaches that I ask off the podcast, at least coaches that don't deal with steroid athletes a lot, people that are dealing with natural athletes, they talk about rest. They talk about sleep in particular, not just taking days off, but actually getting enough sleep. Something that's interesting about me when I'm training jujitsu as hard as I can, I'm really trying to stay in shape, whether my diet's good or bad. Honestly, I don't really notice a huge difference there. But when I am training hard and I'm training a lot, and obviously I'm running my gym, I'm trying to run this podcast. It's just a lot of little things, trying to teach other places, trying to build my brand. When I am doing those things, a lot of times my sleep starts to suffer. Because you're beat up. It's hard to go to sleep. You're thinking about all those things that you had throughout your day. It's hard to go to sleep. And then what starts to happen is I get to a point where I start to deteriorate. Even though I had a great routine and everything was great, and Monday I do this, and Tuesday I do this, Wednesday is this type of training, Thursday is this type of training. If I am not checking the box of sleep, the routine doesn't matter. my podcast starts to suffer. I start to get to these points where I'm going, if I don't get if I don't get 8 hours of sleep tonight, I am going to struggle so much recording a podcast tomorrow. And I have to get my podcast recorded tomorrow because it's part of my routine. Or if I am going to, with my training, oh man, I have a really hard session tomorrow and I just don't feel recovered still. And usually it comes back to not sleeping enough. When I am training hard and I'm actually getting enough sleep, I usually sleep somewhere in like the 10 to 12-hour range. Obviously, this is specific to me. This is specific to a person who pretty much trains jujitsu. That's pretty much the criteria of what I do. And as you get better at something, your ability to put out intensity is different. My 100% now on the mats is significantly different than my 100% when I was a purple belt. And I could go really hard as a purple belt and I could really push myself as a purple belt. But compared to now, where my jujitsu is good enough to where I never really have to be thinking about the next fight, as long as I'm in the moment, as long as I am engaged in the round, I can always think to the next fight. So there's no real lag in between the mental side and the physical side of jujitsu. And so I'm able to go really hard. When I'm doing that a lot, I don't know if it's mental strain, physical strain, or the combination, but the amount of sleep that is required is unbelievable. Versus when I'm doing full-time podcast and all my focus is at the gym, I really require like 6 or 7 hours of sleep a night. But when I add that intensity of training, when I'm hitting for me, it's trying to hit like 3 days a week of hard training. But a lot of times what happens is those 3 days a week turn into 5 days a week, right? Or they turn into 4 or 5 days in a row of hard training. And then that's when I start to notice needing much, much bigger amounts of sleep. And the only way for any of us who's busy, right? You're busy, I'm busy, everybody's busy in the world. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of people are busy in the world. For a lot of us who are busy, getting sleep is one of the easy, or sleep is usually the easiest thing to borrow from, right? Oh, I could just stay up 2 hours later and get done the things that I need to get done for my job or for the gym or for whatever, right? But I could just sacrifice those few hours of sleep. And maybe I have time to sleep in 3 weeks from now. And so, I'll just catch up on sleep then. It really doesn't work that way. There's this book called Effortless. I've referenced this book a million times on the podcast at this point. But I just really think that Greg McKeown does a really good job explaining like getting good at something. That the original book, the first one he wrote, is called Essentialism, and it's just about finding what is important in your life and focusing solely on that and how to focus solely on that. But the next book is called Effortless, and Effortless is about getting to this stage where then you can, for me, do podcasting and jujitsu, but do them so efficiently that they are effortless. And one of the biggest things that he talks about in the book is how important sleep is in order to be effortless. And there's this way that he explained it that is, it'll kind of go into the next point, but there is this way that he explained it. It really made sense to me. We can be at 100%. For most of us, we are not at 100% often, right? When I say 100%, that means being fully rested. And you guys probably know, I assume that those days that you wake up and your jujitsu training feels great. You were engaged in the moment. You're telling yourself, hey, I wish I could feel like this every day. And usually it's after you were injured on the mat and you get to take a few extra days rest and you get to sleep a little longer and you wake up at 100%. And then what we tend to do is go, now I need to, in order to be productive, in order to be important, I need to put out all of this intensity. I have so much energy that I could just give right now. And what tends to happen, a lot of times we tend to waste energy on stupid tasks or on stupid thought processes, things that don't actually fit our goal and that don't actually help us. Instead of aiming, and this isn't really possible, I think, if you do jujitsu, but aiming to wake up at 100% each day. For me, my jiu-jitsu training is better, my teaching is better, my podcast is better when I'm rested. I could re-listen to episodes and then say, "Oh yeah, obviously I was not rested in this episode. My mind is not being as quick. I'm not, a lot of times the topic that I have, it starts to diverge and not even making sense to, at least in my mind, to a point, and that comes from not being rested. And so, I guess this first little bit was just about the importance of rest, but let's talk about some actual ways to get better rest, to get better sleep as a jujitsu athlete, because it's different for somebody who a lot of the podcasts that you listen to where they give you these science-based ideas, and they're great ideas, but they're not specific to a jiu-jitsu athlete. There are other things that we could do that might be helpful. And so I thought I'd just give a few tips that I've found that really are helpful, or have really been helpful to certain people. So my dad, something that he started doing, and this was a game changer for him. And it's not in the cards for everybody. So, if it's not in the cards for you, don't do it. But even for me, I've been doing this more and I have found it being incredibly helpful. Training in the morning or the daytime versus training at night. Uh, a lot of people's schedules, you have to train at night, right? And for a lot of people, those are the biggest classes and the best classes to attend at the gym. And so a lot of us like to gravitate towards those big classes. The problem with training at night is you train from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8, or some classes even 8 to 9. You get home after that. You haven't eaten dinner yet, and you have not even started any type of bedtime routine. You were actually 30 minutes ago in a fight for your life where your adrenaline was going and your heart rate was going. It's going to be very hard to come down from that. And one of the easiest ways that I've seen people that struggle with this, struggle getting sleep at night, is not training at night. Train during the day, and then you can you almost are coming down throughout the day. And by the time you get home and the time you eat dinner, which is now a little bit earlier, you can start to get into a bedtime routine, some type of routine. And that is going to be incredibly important, right? So first suggestion is daytime classes, if that's in the cards, or morning classes, if that's in the card, or even one night a week, one day a week, going to the Thursday daytime instead of the Thursday nighttime. Imagine what you could do if you got 1 extra hour of sleep once a week. Imagine how much better you would feel. Maybe don't imagine it. Maybe experiment with it. Maybe it's just me who notices this big effect when I'm getting good sleep. Some other things to try. There are a lot of 3-letter words out there that can assist in sleep. I won't tell you every one of them, but you have your CBDs, your CBGs, your CBNs, your CBSs, whatever there is. There are all these different ways, and a lot of them are natural, that people are using to get better sleep. Something that I am a huge advocate of now, and maybe not everyone knows about it yet, but it's called CBN, right? There is, everyone kind of knows about CBD now, but CBN actually does have kind of scientific backing showing that it assists in sleep. CBD will help you relax and can definitely help assist in sleep. But actually, for me, I notice that I get less sleep when I take CBD. I fall asleep fast, but I get 6 hours and I wake up and I cannot fall back asleep, and I'm not well rested. I noticed that I didn't get enough sleep, but that's just something that I noticed with myself. Other people I talk to, they use CBD every single night, and it's been like the big thing for them to start to get better effects sleeping, start to get better sleep. But what you'll find is it's different per person. And it's not just what you're taking before bed. It's not just the melatonin that you take or the whatever you take. It is your actions in the lead up to bedtime. If you go train really hard, it is very hard to fall asleep right after that, right? Something that I noticed because, for jujitsu coaches, you don't really get much of a choice on when you're running classes a lot of times. So you are working in that 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9 time frame. Huge thing that's been helpful for me and always has is I have trouble falling asleep after training simply because I am still too hot after training, even like 2 hours after getting done training. If you trained hard, your body is still just really hot. And I found that like a cold shower 30 minutes to an hour before bed, and it does not have to be ice cold, but it does need to be cold enough to get you cold, to get you to either shiver or almost shiver. But I found that that was one of the biggest things for me when I struggle to sleep is a cold shower before bed. These things are things that you are going to have to experiment with, though. You are going to have to try. But the main point I wanted to get across is how important it is to actually get sleep. And we'll kind of tie this in to the next point. So the next point is going to be understanding volume and intensity. So first we are prioritizing rest, and now we need to understand going hard and how often we go hard. So I kind of have this question, and it's this unanswerable question, and I ask myself this a lot, but I also ask a lot of my students this, other grapplers this. How often can you go hard? Obviously, that is going to depend on what hard even means to the person. For me, I kind of need a long enough time. I need like an hour's worth of training to quote unquote be able to go hard. It takes me a little bit to warm up, takes me a little bit to really start firing with my jujitsu and to actually be able to go 100%, right? And again, for me, I struggle going hard more than twice a week anymore. And like I said, that could be an intensity thing. That could be that how much intensity I could put out. That can also just be the 15 years of wear and tear of doing jujitsu that are on my body. I'm not really 100% sure as to why, but I am 100% sure as to the amount. And for me, if I start to creep more than 3 days a week of training hard, anymore, and it's been like this for the last 2 or 3 years, anymore, I tend to get injured. And the thing about those injuries that you get is they're always different. So you can't say, oh, I've been training hard, so I'm going to get a knee injury. But what starts to happen is you get a lot of little nagging injuries. Your body's tight in places it probably shouldn't be tight in. And then you go hard again. And maybe those places get tighter, and then you go hard again, and maybe then you start to notice injuries. You start to get injured simply because your body cannot keep up with the amount of training and the intensity of training. I talk about this on the podcast all the time. We do have to understand that a lot of people that do jujitsu are on PEDs. Okay, they're on steroids. It's inevitable. It is part of it, right? Considering that rest and recovery is the first thing I talked about when it comes to injury prevention. It's why steroids make sense for jiu-jitsu, because they help you recover. They actually help you sleep better. Any of your, anyone that or yourself, when you get on TRT, one of the big effects that comes from that is that you get better sleep. So you are recovering better. You don't always get better sleep, but for a lot of people, they get the effect of getting better sleep. So those guys that are on, though, that are on something, they are going to get to follow different rules than you are. It's just like the kids who actually believed that the Liver King wasn't on the juice. right? And that it was just about eating raw meat. And they've been eating all this raw meat and lifting in the way that he says, but not getting the same results. And it's because they are in two different worlds physically. So for us, if you are someone who's natural, you do need to find what works for you as a natural athlete. If you're not, you need to find what works for you as somebody who's not a natural athlete. Regardless, it is going to be specific to you and specific to how you're treating your body. And it's also going to be specific as what hard actually is. Because for some people, I can, in quotes, roll, but not go hard. I can roll and go 60, 70% and kind of go with my blue belts and, go with my smaller people, go with the girls at the gym, man, beat down all the teens in the teen class. I can do that, and it's not me going hard, even though I am live rolling. The problem, though, is that that is very hard to do. Even if I had somebody that I'm competitive with, I'm going to have a lot of trouble rolling at 60% with that person or 70% with that person. So, one of the biggest things that you can do with intensity is choose your rounds better. I know I'm always preaching designated winner. I'm always preaching positional sparring. I'm always preaching different training methods. But let's say you are just rolling live. One of the simplest things that you can do, and this is what I'll do on like a Monday night. On Monday night, I would rather not train. My body's a little beat up. We lifted in the morning. I trained really hard the day before. And a lot of times I would rather not train hard. I would rather get some movement in though, too, because Tuesday is my off day or my main off day. And I go, okay, this is my last chance to get some jujitsu in before I take Tuesday off. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll roll with my blue belts that I'm bigger than. That's kind of my criteria. Or maybe we're the same size, but nobody bigger than me. Probably nobody even purple belt. Uh, my purple belts are just too tough. They'll beat me up. They'll push me way too hard. And that's not what I'm looking to do that night. And of course, I would rather just train live every night. It's so much easier. There's way less thought that goes into it. Just say yes to every round, go out and go hard every single night. But in order to get good at jiu-jitsu, we need to be focused on longevity. We have to, you're not going to get good in one day, right? You cannot create a jiu-jitsu career in one day, but you can end a jiu-jitsu career in one day, right? What I think that we need to do differently as jiu-jitsu athletes is no longer go into each training session as today is the day for me to win or today is the day for me to get some really hard rounds in. Obviously, I'm a big supporter of going really hard. I am a big supporter of doing a lot of live rounds. I think that there is definitely reason to do that, and I think that it creates certain types of training that you just cannot get. It creates certain amount of jujitsu. You learn to make your jujitsu more efficient when you do 10 tens in a day, right? Because you have to. But looking at how much your body can actually take, and a lot of times we just can look at the past. If you've been training for a year, if you've been training for 2 years, you most likely sustained some type of jujitsu injury, especially if you've been consistent. A lot of times you can start to kind of reverse engineer that injury. Talk to yourself, ask yourself about that injury. Was I getting good sleep? Almost always you're going to say no. No, I was not well rested. I was clinically overtrained. Usually that's what you're going to find. Every bad injury that I have ever gotten, I can, at least I've gotten in the last 5 years. I don't know, it's hard to think back much longer than that. But in the last 5 years, pretty much since I've been a black belt, every injury that I've gotten, that morning going into training, I said to myself, maybe I shouldn't be training today. You know what? There are people visiting from out of town. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to train. I've got to do that today. But really, if you look at that, if you really think about that, that's just ego. Like I'm not thinking about myself physically. I'm not thinking about my routine. I'm not thinking about growth. I'm thinking about performance when I do that. There are people that I need to train with that want to train with me, and I need to, I can beat those guys even when I'm tired, even when I'm exhausted, and then I get injured, and then I'm out for months. And all of those training sessions that I missed over the course of these 3 months or whatever, however long it was, I wouldn't have missed those if I take a day off, if I'm prioritizing my rest, if I'm understanding how much volume and how much intensity I can have. And I'll give you guys, just before we end on the idea of volume intensity, one more thought on it is that your life off the mat is going to affect your volume and intensity, how much you can put off during the holidays. If you have 6 Christmases that you have to hit, and every one of them you're answering questions about, the people asking you about, oh, so you're still doing taekwondo, and then throwing like a karate chop, or whatever the family asks. um I just went to Thanksgiving. All my little cousins are wrestling. No one thought to tell me that. How bizarre. Like, hey, yeah, your cousin is one of the best simplifiers of grappling on the planet, but we're not even going to tell him that you're wrestling. How crazy. I did get on him, and they're like, hey, you guys need to be doing jujitsu too. You've got to be grappling, you know? But yeah, went to a bunch of Thanksgivings. Perfect example. During those Thanksgivings, I'm going to open mats. I started to notice, wow, physically, I am not able to do what I normally am. I'm feeling off. The next day I go train, I'm feeling off. And so instead of going and pushing that third day of training while I'm doing all of these different Thanksgiving dinners and all of these different family gatherings, just all of these different things taking me out of my routine, plus trying to do all the things that I normally do, I started to go, okay, well, how about instead this time I take today off? And it's a weird reason to take off a jujitsu class. I'm taking off because I went to too many Thanksgivings. I'm taking off because my outside life is going to affect my life on the mat, and the amount of output that I'm putting in these, whatever, in at work, at school, at whatever. Um, you know, During finals week, maybe I do need to take an extra day off of training. My body is just, I'm using so much mental energy. And then when I'm going into training, I'm not feeling good. I thought one of the best pieces of advice, one of the best answers that I got this entire year when it came to asking about routine, asking about rest, was when I talked to Mark Vives. I said, okay, how do you know when you're overtrained? And the answer was so simple: when you can't do things that you normally can. When you can't do things that you normally can. For instance, I was talking about that during Thanksgiving. I was not able to, I wasn't able to pass. It was weird. Just did not feel good passing the guard. And, my mind was right. I was there. I was engaged. I was trying to pass, but it was not feeling good. And then the next day of training, I noticed the same thing. And that's when it clicked. Hey, you didn't forget your jujitsu technique. You didn't forget your ideas. You didn't get worse over these last 3 days. You're not performing well because you are exhausted, because you are beat up. And then what's nice too is tell your significant other about how important rest is. Tell them, hey, sometimes I'm coming home and I'm really grouchy, and maybe I don't need to go to the gym. And even though my mind says I do, and I'm saying, yeah, I need to absolutely go to the gym, maybe that's not what the struggle is right now. Maybe the real struggle is that I need a nap. And having people in your life that do that. My wife does that for me. On Monday, my dad called me right after practice, and he said, hey, you doing all right? Oh, yeah, doing fine. He goes, you looked really, really tired today. And I go, I'm feeling really tired. I really am feeling exhausted. I'm feeling burnt out. Just that, just having somebody else that can notice that in you, instead of me having that mental gymnastics that we all play, where we go, no, you're just being weak. You're just being a baby. you have an outside perspective, that will help you a lot when it comes to understanding volume and intensity. I think last little thing I didn't really, just kind of talked about the importance of those two is understand that you can go into a jiu-jitsu class and do no live rolling at all and still get better. And I would even argue that you can go into a jiu-jitsu class and sit on the sideline the entire time, but stay focused and you will get better. I have a perfect example. One of my blue belts, his daughter trains and he trains, and he had a knee injury. He actually went to the doctor and they said, yeah, you have a torn ACL. And they were like, you haven't had an ACL in like 25 years. Right. And so it wasn't a jiu-jitsu injury. Thank God. But still, an injury keeps you out for like a year. And during that year, this blue belt came in, he would bring his daughter to class, and then he would watch what's being taught. And then he would even watch the live rounds and just be engaged for an hour, be engaged in jiu-jitsu for an hour. And what's really interesting, and this is always going to be subjective, but I'm watching this guy roll now that he's back. And he has definitely over the last year gotten better at jiu-jitsu without ever getting to be on the mat, right? We talk about the things that make you better at jiu-jitsu. It's going to be understanding and repetition. He wasn't able to get his repetition, but he was able to understand deeper. And a lot of times, those mental reps of understanding things, they make you better at jiu-jitsu. You can say, oh man, when I think about myself in half guard, I don't usually do that idea. How could I do that idea? And you make that mental note. And it starts to help you. We talked about, I have 2 episodes with Jeff Scholes, and one of them is on imagery training. It's on doing repetition in your mind and how effective that can be for progression. It's the same thing when we're thinking about volume and intensity in jiu-jitsu. If I can get better not rolling live, if I can get better not even being on the mat, sometimes in order to get better, I will just do that. I will just watch an instruction. I will just watch class and go, and then maybe even ask a question if the coach says something I don't understand. Just increase my understanding a little bit and protect my body and get that rest, prioritize recovery. We'll look at the third way to never be injured again after a message from our sponsor. Do you get value out of the iSecond Jiu-Jitsu show? Do you get value out of hearing me talk about jiu-jitsu and lessons to learn from it for an hour? Do you think you would get more value if I did an episode completely for you, specifically tailored to what your goals are, specifically helping you set the goals that you need to set, looking at your training methods, looking at your schedule, and redoing it from the perspective of simplifying jiu-jitsu, from the perspective of sucking less at jiu-jitsu? Well, guess what? I right now have 2 spots available per week for private lessons. And these private lessons, I decided to not call private lessons. They are actually private podcasts because they are online only. They are through Zoom, and they are specifically made for the listeners of the iSecond Jiu-Jitsu show. So if you have a problem in your jiu-jitsu, you have a goal that you're trying to accomplish, you just need deeper understanding of something that we talk about on the show or something you think I could help you with, you can go to simplifyingjujitsu.com/private and schedule yourself for a private lesson. And this is a 1 hour, like I said, private podcast where we, just like on the show, look at all kinds of different lessons, all kinds of different things that we could be doing, except this time it is specific to you. So when your significant other is like, hey, what do you want for Christmas this year? I cannot think what to get you for Christmas. Simply let your significant other know, I want to suck less at jiu-jitsu, and then hit them with the simplifyingjujitsu.com/private, and you will be able to get on the schedule and get ready to suck less at jiu-jitsu. Hope you guys check it out. Let's get back to the episode. The third and final way to never be injured again is understanding your role as a grappler. So we've kind of hinted towards this the whole episode of that everybody's different, that the routines you need to sleep are going to be different than the routines I need to sleep, that the volume and intensity that you can put out and that you can sustain is going to be different than mine. And it's going to also change for you as you continue to progress, as you continue to be a better grappler. And so I think the best place to start with this idea of understanding your role as a grappler is understanding that we all, in jiu-jitsu, in any martial art, we all have the same goal. No matter what you are trying to accomplish in jiu-jitsu. We talk about using jiu-jitsu as a vehicle for travel, as a vehicle to make money, right? You can use jiu-jitsu for so many different things. You want to become a coach. You want to, you want to become a social media influencer. You can use jiu-jitsu to do that. But no matter what, you should not lose sight of the original goal. The original goal for all of us when we do any martial art is self-progression, is getting better just a little bit than we were yesterday. When you focus on, oh, well, this guy's getting his purple belt. Why am I not getting my purple belt? This person beats me all the time. Why can I never beat them? Those things are not self-progression. When we can actually take a step back and say, hey, I learned a little bit more about passing half guard tonight. I learned a little bit more about putting pressure in side control tonight. Sometimes I learned a huge amount more about putting pressure in side control. I learned so much more about passing half guard. When we focus on ourselves internally, we focus on the things that we are trying to get better at, what happens is that guy getting his purple belt, it stops mattering. That guy that beats you all the time, it stops mattering, because that guy that beats you all the time, he is just a tool to help you. Not a tool. He's not a tool. Maybe he is a tool. I don't know. But he is an asset. That would be a better word. An asset to help you get better at jiu-jitsu. A lot of times when we play the game Designated Winner at my gym, I will first with everybody say, hey, it is important to understand that the goal for the top and the bottom person when we're playing this game of Designated Winner is to get the bottom person better at guard retention. We both have the same goal. And it's not a game against each other, right? We have Designated Winner. The bottom person wins every time. So what my job is as the top player is to create as many situations where they have to use guard retention as possible. And then every time that they do it, I can even kind of acknowledge, oh, that was nice. That was good. I liked what he did there. And we're both getting better, but we're both focused on getting the bottom person better at guard retention, right? When we start looking at jiu-jitsu, each class, every minute of each class is, how could I be getting better right now? Could it just be focusing on what my coach is saying? Could it be drilling a little bit more, being more engaged while we're drilling more? There are a lot of ideas, there are a lot of ways that we could be getting better. But unless you are focused on getting better, usually you won't touch any of them. Usually you will just do what most people do, show up, drill the 3 moves that were taught a few times with no actual engagement, with no focus, with no goal of implementing this into your game, and then roll live, do your hard rounds, and that's the end of it. Instead of just being a little more intentional, and saying, okay, tonight, I know that we're covering side control. I will get better at side control tonight. I lose side control every time that I grapple with anybody. And so I'm going to be engaged in all the instruction. When the coach comes over and says, hey, do you need help with this? Even if it doesn't totally apply to what we're learning, I'm going to ask my coach, hey, I lose side control all the time. Why am I losing it? Because if I could get that question answered, I got better tonight. And my focus on self progression, it was useful. And most of the time, the people that get better are the people that really desire to get better. Very few people just naturally can show up each night and get better at jiu-jitsu. It is the people that show up engaged and actually say, hey, I am here to become a better grappler. You know, when we're talking about your role as a grappler, right? Maybe that role for right now is that you are one of the blue belts and there's one white belt who kind of reminds you of yourself 2 years ago. And maybe on top of you getting better at jiu-jitsu, you can start to sharpen the skill of teaching a little bit. And you're not doing it as trying to get private lesson money or something like that, simply doing it to just help out that white belt. While you're doing it, since you're focused on self-progression, you're progressing as a coach, you're progressing as a teacher. And so if you ever decide to use that one day, you can. But it starts with focusing on self-progression. The next thought is don't forget the art. So often we make jiu-jitsu result-based, performance-based, and we forget that it is art. Imagine we were watching live rounds, but instead of watching them, we went into an art gallery and each live round was its own piece of art. If you learn to watch jiu-jitsu, it's like that. If you watch jiu-jitsu a lot, jiu-jitsu becomes this beautiful piece of art. When we start to put all kinds of other expectations that we have to be great at this one move, or we have to win this next tournament, we have to do whatever. A lot of times it's easy to lose sight that we are still artists. Over everything else, we are martial artists. We are trying to progress, to get better at what we can, but we're also trying to produce something beautiful. One of my students just asked me the other night, he goes, when you watch white belts, do you just like shake your head? Like when they're rolling, just like shake your head the whole time, like, oh my gosh, these guys suck. And I go, no. I go, when I'm riding my bike and I see two dudes square up about to get in a fight, even though I know they have no skill, I'm stopping my bike ride to watch a fight, right? Because I'm a martial artist. To me, there is beauty in that. Of course, I always watch at a distance just in case somebody dies in this fight. I don't have to I'm not an accomplice or something like that. But I'll always watch. I will always watch fighting. I will always watch grappling, whether it's my white belts, whether it's random white belts. It is enjoyable to me because I understand it as art, not as, hey, this guy is going to win or this guy is going to win, and that matters. You're going to win and you're going to lose like thousands of times if you stay with jiu-jitsu long enough. Those things don't really matter that much. It is the enjoyment that you get by creating jiu-jitsu, right? Every time that you go in to do a guard pass, even though it's a guard pass that you were taught by somebody else, you are still creating a piece of art. And I think it's very easy to forget about that. And then this is the last little note, and this kind of ties everything together. And that is the thought that routine is something you build, not something you buy. So pretty much all of this, rest, volume, and intensity, understanding your role as a grappler, they can all be tied into routine. This actually, 3 ways to never be injured again is the name of this episode. When I first wrote it, it was called The Perfect Training Schedule. And I was trying to decide how to implement the perfect training schedule. And what I found is that very few people in jiu-jitsu struggle with go train hard. Very few of us do. It's like the people that struggle with that, they get weeded out of jiu-jitsu really quickly, probably. Most of us struggle, especially that have been in jiu-jitsu for a long enough time. It's because we love it. It's because it's so much fun. And we struggle not just going hard. And one of the best ways to beat that is with the right routine. And the right routine is not something that I say, hey, this is the routine that I follow, so this is what you guys should do too. Of course, if you are a jiu-jitsu school owner and a podcast creator and you're trying to compete at adult black belt at 181 pounds, it probably is. It probably is a good fit for you. It probably is a really good routine for you. But if that's not your situation, your routine's going to have to be different. And so, looking up on YouTube, watching this video and saying, okay, whatever Josh does, I'm going to do. Yes, it can give you kind of a baseline. It can give you some general ideas, but you have to build it around your schedule. You have to build it around your goals. You have to build it around what your life is like off the mat too. And so I think that is where I will leave you guys. Just to reiterate, the 3 ways to never get injured again are to understand rest, to understand the relationship of volume and intensity, and understanding your role as a grappler. Don't forget that the secret to your success is in your daily routine. It's also in your weekly routine. It's in your monthly routine. And the secret to your jiu-jitsu success is no different. So we're at the very beginning of December. Spend this month focused on building a routine, building a mindset, building some goals that you can look at the beginning of the year in 2023 that hopefully by the end of the year in 2023 get you to where you hope to be. That's all I have for you guys. And that is the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I really liked doing this one on kind of rest and recovery and just not getting injured, because this is sometimes I do an episode based on what I'm really good at. And like the whole episode is, this is things that have helped me get better at this idea or this topic. Not being injured is not something that I am great at. I am not the king of being injury free. And so this is me more learning with you guys on this episode. So it's just a little bit different of a perspective. And hopefully you guys got something out of it. Hopefully it was helpful. And hopefully it will help you deal with less injuries than I've dealt with coming up. Don't forget, if you guys are interested in the private podcast, if you're interested in scheduling an online private lesson with me, be sure to schedule it as soon as possible, because I just don't have a lot of spots available, and you can only schedule like 3 or 4 weeks out. So really, even as of right now, there are probably 8 spots available that you could schedule one of these private lessons, and you and everybody else is just now hearing about it. So I would assume, I would hope, I would believe that those spots will not be available for very long. And so, like I said, simplifyingjujitsu.com/private. You can also go to the link in the description of the podcast and get scheduled for one of these private lessons. But besides that, hope you guys are enjoying the show. I really think that we are going to be able to turn the show up a notch in 2023 and really, I don't know. I'm starting to really figure out what I think the show is and what I want it to be. And so from there, once we actually have that vision, it'll be time to start knocking out a lot of podcasts. And I'm excited about it. Executive producer Bryce Allen is also excited about it. He's messaging me, coming up to me at class. Hey, when are we going to start recording stuff, Josh? And that's not how he talks, but it might as well be. Yeah, so we've got the motivation, we've got the setup. It's about time to start rolling. I have some good interviews for you guys before the year ends. And then I think we're going to kind of change the routine of the podcast. Still coming out with an episode every Thursday, but I really think that we might be coming out with more than that. But who knows to be certain? You know, that's for future Josh to figure out and future Bryce to figure out. But that's all I have for you guys today. Hope you guys like this one. Hope you guys sign up for a private podcast. Hope you give me a 5-star review. Hope you got something out of this. Hope you stay injury free. And most importantly, I hope today's episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys.